Welcome to Witham Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
We are back at it again for another edition of Witham's Hot Topics, where we're focusing on multi-employer employee benefit plans, cybersecurity, and fraud topics. We are so blessed today to have Julie Tracy with us, who is what I would call and consider a cyber expert. Julie, how you doing today?
I'm great, Aaron. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I'd like to start with just asking you to share a little bit about your background and how you got here and just how you have become so knowledgeable about the cybersecurity space.
Absolutely. So I am a manager in the advisory services department of Witham in the cybersecurity area. And I've been here for about 7 months. So I'm kind of new. I love it. I love working with, I work actually a lot with multi-employer benefit plans. Love working with them. The people are great. The challenges that they have are great. Prior to coming to Witham, I worked at a community bank in the Midwest as the information security officer and director of IT. I have over 25 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. 4 years ago, I decided to go back to school and get my master's degree in information security and assurance, which they have renamed cybersecurity now. So I really wanted to be able to put that credential behind all of the years of experience that I have, kind of as a little bow on the cake of the experience to show, hey, there's some validity in the experience and whatnot that I have. But I've worked with obviously multi-employer funds. I've worked in healthcare, financial services, manufacturing, insurance, a lot of nonprofits. So I've got a wide breadth of knowledge as far as cybersecurity in various types of industries moving forward.
Excellent. And what I will say is that we are so lucky to have you here with us. So I will start by just asking, we've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity and breaches and fraud, and just you can't turn on the news without seeing something about this. Can you speak at all about the statistics behind some of the types of schemes and frauds and phishing that we're seeing nowadays?
Absolutely. So I went out and I kind of did a quick cursory look. So the Anti-Phishing Working Group, it's a great nonprofit organization that really tracks phishing, not just in the US, but worldwide. And so they already have statistics out for the first quarter of 2022, and they actually have observed over 1 million phishing attacks just in the first quarter of 2022. And that's the first time that they have ever exceeded 1 million attacks in one quarter. When you look at industry sectors, financial services, SaaS, which is software as a service. So think about your webmail, your Office 365, QuickBooks Online, things like that. And then retailers are really their top targets. So they're really looking at where's the money? How can I get it? And if I can't get the money, let me get the data that will make money for me. So they're looking at account numbers, credit card information, things like that. Think about how valuable your email is. How valuable business email compromise is a huge attack vector right now. I've actually just observed this recently with a client. Their email wasn't taken over, but what the threat actors did is they went out and they purchased a domain, one letter off from this company. These guys were great. They went out and they did all the research. They looked at their vendors did, and then purchased domains one letter off from multiple of their vendors. Then they sent an email out pretending to be the controller from the main company saying, hey, we've changed with the fake email address. We've changed our account information. So when you ACH us your payment this month, this is the new bank account information that you need to send it to. It went, and then to make it so that it was hidden from the originating company, they also then sent an email from the fake vendor accounts back to that company saying, hey, we have problems with the ACH this week. It won't process until next week. So they're not going to call right away because they didn't get the funds on the day that they normally do. So it would give them a week then to get that ACH through, and then have a money mule move that money to another bank, probably most likely either physically withdrawing it from the account or wiring it to another account and then wiring it again. And they wire it multiple times until they have somebody on the ground that can actually take it out. So yeah, so it was interesting. So they actually had a vendor fall for it. That vendor wired or ACH funds to the wrong bank, an incorrect bank. So we worked with this company, had them notify all of their vendors that they work with and say, hey, we have not changed our ACH instructions. If we do, it's a two-step process. We may email you that information, but we're going to call you and we're going to tell you that we're doing it. There needs to be 2 steps when you do that kind of stuff to verify it. But I've seen multiple times, especially working in a bank, where people have emailed stuff and it wasn't them. Hey, change my wiring instructions, change my ACH instructions. In the mortgage industry, that's huge. People are wiring money at closing. And so people will then try and intercept those emails, and they'll if they know you're looking for a house, then they may be able to compromise your account. And then they just sit and they wait and they read your email, they read what you send, they read what you receive. And then when the opportunity strikes, they will then be you and send the incorrect wiring instructions. Think about when you buy a house and you're putting 20% down on a $500,000 house. $100,000 of your hard-earned money is gone. So really understanding that and understanding those kinds of attacks and what you can do to protect yourself is huge.
Wow. So I can only speak for myself and just some of the statistics that you just shared and what that makes me think. And my mind goes right to just how to protect myself. If I'm someone who works for a plan, if I'm plan staff or plan management, I think about the security and the insurance behind cybersecurity. So can you speak at all to what types of insurance and just how to go about even renewing your insurance policy if I'm a plan?
Absolutely. So we've actually worked with a lot of plans who have gotten their cybersecurity renewals. And so 2 things. One, the premiums have gone up significantly. They've seen huge increases in that. And a lot of times they're seeing decreases in coverage. The other thing that we've noticed as far as trends is the requirements to maintain or even get that insurance now, and all of the controls that you have to have in place. It used to be a 1 or 2 page questionnaire that you could go through and you could fill that form out and answer it. And it was always stuff that every business already had in place. And now what they've done is they've said, okay, that's not enough. We're paying out too many claims related to this. So let me add all these additional things that you have to have. So we're working with a lot of funds that need to get these things implemented. MFA, encryption, security awareness training to their end users. So these are all things that are actually being required by the insurance companies. And oh yeah, they're now adding the act of war exclusion to cybersecurity. So think about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And if they can attribute your cyber attack to Russia, Ukraine, Iran, to those kinds of things that are known cyber terrorists, that nation states are actually performing that, understand that your claim may be excluded as an act of war exclusion from that carrier.
I think that is a very important point, because we will want all of the plans that we work with to do all that they can to make sure that they are covered and that they are eligible. So that's great information. So talking about just the increases in security that I'm sure we're all seeing, and I think about what we're doing here with them with the multi-factor authentication and just how many times we have to approve duos and some of these other security measures that we've added. Do you have anything for us as far as what a plan or an organization should be doing to make it a little bit easier for the end user?
Absolutely. You know, when you go through and you set all of this stuff up, I mean, you want it to be effective. You want it to be a solid security mechanism to protect the assets that the plans have. But what you don't want is it to be so burdensome to the end user that they're looking at ways to subvert it or get around it. So think about every time you log in, you need to have, a multi-factor authentication challenge. Here we use Duo, so you get a push, you have to approve that push. And then maybe once you get into something else, it requires a push, da-da-da-da-da. So how do you get around that if you're an end user? You never log out. You try and stay logged in as long as possible. And then you might leave that workstation logged in maybe in a public place, you step away for a moment, you're at, a coffee shop getting coffee, working on something, and then you just get up to get that cup of coffee, and then you're just not as vigilant as you were because you kind of get some fatigue. And so there's got to be that balancing act where, the security is there, it's good, it's robust, but it's palatable to the end user as well. So really working as an IT department, or if you're using a managed service provider, to really work with them and make sure that everything is tweaked so that it's providing the maximum level of protection, but yet not so burdensome to your end users that they're actively seeking ways to subvert that because they just find it to be really difficult to get their job done.
Thank you. So if I were to ask you, what's the number one piece of advice that you would share for someone who's wanting to avoid phishing attacks and some of these cyber attacks that can happen? What would you say?
My number one thing, because think about this, when you're talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about kind of like a home defense system. So you're talking about your locks, your doors, your windows, your alarm system that you have in place that's protecting your house, which is your fund, your data, things like that. And if the one thing that you can't do is when someone's trying to get in, that somebody just goes and opens the door and lets them in. So you want that end user training that we talked about previously, and understanding what that is, how often you need to do it, making sure that users embrace that. And you're going to you want to do things like content filtering. You want to reward people for reporting phishing. That's huge. You want people to understand and recognize what it is. They recognize what it is through the training, and then when they report it, give them some kind of reward, a Starbucks gift card, different things like that, because you want to test them. And that's actually part of it. You do phishing tests, you look at the statistics that you have. And so if people are expecting those kinds of things and are always suspicious of stuff, it's going to help enforce what's going on with your locks and your technical controls that you have in place. What we have learned through the last several years is that technical controls aren't enough, that you have to have the end users have a part in this as well. And so really equipping them well is so important.
I think that's a great point, because it's one thing to have controls. It's another thing to have people to actually use them. So finding ways that people can easily use them and also protect your organization are great.
Yep.
Speaking of that, are there any protections that people can use in their own personal life? So we're geared towards multi-employer employee benefit plans and plan management and trustees and anyone else who may be listening. But what about in your own personal life? Are there protections that you can have, for example, your email or just your online activity as a whole?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I love about cybersecurity. No offense, Aaron, but I know you love audits and you do audits, but I hope to never in my lifetime have an audit, of my personal financial situation and my taxes and things like that. But there is an applicability of cybersecurity across the gamut, not only within business, but in your home life. You think about you're going into online banking, your emails, all of those kinds of things. And so what can I do to protect myself at home from these same kinds of attacks? I mean, obviously, we hope that the security awareness training that you are able to receive at the fund is able to then use at home. So you become more suspicious of emails, and that you don't just trust everything that you receive in email. Within most people, you're talking about your Gmails, your Outlook.com emails, AOL's still kicking out there. So what can you do with those types of emails to help minimize the amount of phishing attacks that you would, receive via email, those kinds of things? So one, multi-factor authentication, just like we talked about on your corporate email, multi-factor authentication is available on most types of consumer class emails. So I know Gmail, you can set up multi-factor authentication for that. I have that. You also want to have something that will help filter that stuff out. So you can go into your email settings and set up more aggressive spam filtering. So things you may end up with maybe one or two things in your spam that are legit versus 25 things that are phishing in your inbox. You want to move that stuff to the spam filter. And then there are some types of endpoint protection. So like, I'm going to give examples. I'm not endorsing any, but like Bitdefender, WebRoot, things like that, where actually they have some phishing protection in place where they will help to filter, again, your inbox. They also have protections in place. You can install a plugin to your web browser with these companies as well that will alert you if the reputation of the site is anything but optimal. So it may say, hey, that looks like a bad site. I wouldn't recommend going there. So Google has that. You can set that up within Google Chrome on there as well. And then as you are doing, especially your banking, you want to make sure that your bank is using multi-factor authentication so that, and a lot of times it's not, you can't just go into your security settings and turn it on. I may take a phone call to that bank and say, hey, I want multi-factor authentication on my account. They'll be, oh, sure, we can turn that on for you. And then they'll walk you through the steps of getting that set up and configured on your account. So you want to definitely do all of those things. Anything that has money moving on it, you want to use multi-factor authentication as much as possible. So when you like log into your credit card company to pay that credit card off, you want to be using multi-factor authentication there. So just as much as you can, those pieces that we talked about for your business, if they are available for you personally, then absolutely 100% take advantage of them because they're there for your protection.
Thank you for that. So we have talked a lot today about controls and insurance and security and multi-factor authentication and some of the things that you can put in place to avoid these attacks. I'm going to ask the $1 million question, because what do you do if you end up getting hacked? What should you do first, and where do you go, and who should you talk to?
Sure, absolutely. So, in our department, we say it's not if, it's when. And I've had people say, I don't want to deal with XYZ company because they were hacked. And my response is, everybody's going to be hacked. I want to know how they handled it and how they dealt with it after, how did they get through it? And so as you prepare, part of being hacked is preparing to be hacked. And what I mean by that is all of the things that you have in place to help protect you. We talked about multi-factor authentication. We talked about endpoint protection, your next-gen firewalls, things like that. But you want to know where your data is. You want to know what you're protecting. So is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? Those kinds of things. The next thing is you want to make sure that you have good backups, that you are backing up all of your data. A lot of times, you'll either upgrade your backup solution or you'll change backup solutions, and maybe you didn't select everything that you needed for a backup. And then when you're going, somebody calls and says, hey, I deleted blah, 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 blah file. I need it back. And you go to restore it and you get that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach because, oh, I missed that in the configuration. So you want to do backups every day. Then you want to, once a week, once a month, test those backups. Did I back up everything? Can I restore this backup? Is it corrupted? Is my media bad? Those kinds of things. So you want to have backups and you want to test those backups. So one of the things, there are two things when you talk about backups. One is air gapped. So air gapped is just that. There's a gap of air between the device and the network. So and when I say network, I even mean like a wireless network. So it's not attached to the wireless network. It cannot be attached to the wireless network. It's not plugged into a system. It is completely offline, inaccessible from any means within your network. So once a backup is completed, it's removed from the network and air gapped so that if there is ransomware, that the bad guys can't encrypt your backups, because that's one of their new tricks out there, because they're like, oh, people quit paying because they've got good backups. Well, if I make their backups not good, then they've got to pay. The other thing when you talk about backups is a term called immutable. And what immutable is it cannot be changed or deleted in its form as it sits. So typically, people want to do, or they're like, well, I've backed up everything to the cloud. Well, you still should probably have an offline backup copy on a piece of physical media, either a tape or a physical hard drive, in which it is removed from the network, removed from the cloud, in case all of that stuff and gets corrupted. And really, the companies that handle it best have multiple backups in multiple pieces of media. Now, they don't do their daily backups this way, but they'll do their weekend backups this way. They'll do their month-end backups this way. They'll do their year-end backups this way, where they have it in the cloud. And what that is, or maybe even what's called a network attached storage device, where it's physically on the network. Those allow for quick backups and quick restores. Then they're going to put it in. So if they've got it on site, then they're going to back it up to the cloud. They're also then going to back it up to some type of media that can be removed from the network. Like I said, either a tape or a physical hard drive, and then they're going to store it off site. And the reason that they store it off site is because if that location is, I'm from Indiana originally, and when I worked at the bank, one of our branches was hit by a tornado twice. And so we want to store things not at a location that can be hit by a tornado, damaged by flooding, fire. Any building is susceptible to fire. And so understanding those risks and then having at a different location. Either you have a cold storage location, you have a lockbox at a bank, something like that, where you can store it off site. And then have it, and then in the event that you have to go back to that, you can then, so your first stop is your on-site backups. If those are corrupted, then you can go to those off-site backups, retrieve those, know that they're good, and then test them. But you want to test those as well. So kind of thinking about backups as multiple layers, and not just thinking, oh, I backed it up once, I stored it in the cloud, or I stored it on my NAS, and I'm good to go. You've got to really think about the big picture on that. So those are things that you do to prepare. If something happens, what do? You have to have a plan, okay? And it's called an incident response plan. And so it's kind of your blueprint of what do you do, who do you call, who's in charge, those kinds of things. And understand that when an incident happens, it's not just an IT event that they run. Typically, this is a C-level event that involves your CEO, your CFO, your operations, because it impacts the entire business, not just the IT department. And so each one of those players has a seat at the table and has a role to play with that. Then you also have your outside vendors. So you have, you may have a managed service provider that's running your IT network. And so if you do, then they have a seat at the table. If you have someone that's doing 24/7 monitoring of your security system, a SOC, Security Operations Center, if you have that, they have a seat at the table. Know that you in advance have someone that you can contact for outside counsel, because you want all of this stuff covered by a confidentiality. And so once you start talking to outside counsel, that counsel then has confidentiality over these discussions for you. And so that helps protect that as well. You also want to know, you're going to contact your insurance carrier, your cyber insurance carrier that we talked to previously. They're going to have a preferred provider list for you. So they're going to have a cyber law firm for you. They're going to have a incident response team for you. They're going to have a forensics teams for you. Now, I say for you, but remember, these are from the insurance company, so they're insurance company first. So you may want to use those. You may be required to use those. You can also choose if you want to have your own experts as well for those kinds of things. I recommend you have your own outside counsel, and not, you're still going to have to talk to the counsel from and deal with the counsel from the insurance company, but your outside counsel is 100% going to have your best interest at hand. And they may recommend a forensics team. They may recommend an incident investigation team, those kinds of things, to work with you on that. But you're going to want to have those in the ready, and you're going to want to have that contact information in your incident response plan, because when it hits, you're not going to be wanting to scramble and go, oh, we talked about getting a lawyer to handle this, but I don't know who to call. Who should we call? And so now you're in the midst of a crisis, and then you're trying to help or trying to deal with and find people to help you in that crisis. So those people should be identified in advance so that you have a relationship with them. You can also, when the legal counsel says it's time, you've got the resources of the FBI, Secret Service, if there's any kind of financial aspect to this. People think of Secret Service as only presidential protection. They handle the vast majority of all financial crimes in the United States. And so understanding how they work and what they do. So if there's anything monetarily involved with this, you definitely want to work with them. And we've actually worked with some of our clients and have them gotten them set up with actual contacts within the Secret Service that they touch base with a couple of times a year to just say, hey, are you still there? They have their personal cell phone numbers. So if something happens, you're just not calling 1-800, I hope I get someone. You're actually getting a phone number and a person that's going to answer and be responsive. And then they provide you, if they happen to be gone, like on vacation or something like that, they give you their backup number as well. So the person that's their backup when they're out will respond as well. So having those key contacts, knowing what to do, walking through a tabletop exercise for ransomware is really important, because that will help you understand the strengths and weaknesses of your incident response plan. It will help people to understand their roles and responsibilities. And the thing that I like to really enforce with a tabletop exercise is that people think, oh, only one thing's going to happen when I have an incident. It doesn't work that way. I did one recently with a company within the financial services space, and I had 10 different things going on at once. And they're like, I don't know which one is it. And I said, that's exactly right. And it doesn't happen just, oh, day one, somebody opened an email and now I have phishing. The threat actors have gotten really good because they want to hide, they want to look, they want to figure out where the best place of attack is. So you may have someone that opens a phishing email, provides credentials, whatever it is, lets that threat actor into your network. The actual average dwell time is over 200 days for someone to be in your network before you know it. And so what they're doing is they're looking, they're pushing, they're pulling the string to see where they can get access, what kind of data you have, and where they're going to target that. So they spend a lot of time investigating. You have a few that aren't very skilled that may, try and encrypt stuff right away, but typically those people are stopped right away as well. So you want to really have a plan. You want to test it. You want to really think through different scenarios, because you're not going to do it on your own. When I was before coming here, I thought I can just do a tabletop on my own. I don't need someone to lead it. And let me tell you, having someone lead it and you not knowing what's coming next is so different than you've written up a scenario in your head and you kind of step through it, because you don't throw all the curveballs that happen in real life.
Wow. Well, I think I can speak for all of us just by saying that this is becoming increasingly more complex just every day. The learning is never going to stop, because this isn't going away. So we've heard some great statistics about just how prevalent fraud is. We've heard some ways that we can protect ourselves and our organizations. We've even heard some examples about how these threat actors are becoming a part of our organization. So I want to take a second out just to thank Julie for spending her time with us and sharing some of these tidbits of information that we can take home with us. So thank you again. And for all of our listeners out there, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that. I'm Aaron Slaughter. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time for more Hot Topics with Witham.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at witham.com. That's WITHUM.com.